Hello and welcome everybody, and thank you guys for joining me again. My name is Wilky and I'm here with a quick rundown of the temperature mechanic and how to deal with it and explaining you a few things in that regard. So this is the mechanic that is omnipresent in pretty much anywhere where you are in the way of winter. We're currently in phase 1, so we're just dealing with cold right now, but we're also going to be dealing with heat in the future. So the mechanics are still the same. It might be more difficult to deal with heat later on, considering this is the end game phase, but we'll see about that. Now, first things first, I think it's most important to understand where to look at and understand what you're seeing. If you go to your inventory, you have this new little bar chart or thermometer, if you will, that explains you, for example, what the cozy zone is and, you know, the negative effects of being too cold or too hot. Now, I think this goes without saying, your main target here is to try and stay within the cozy range. Most importantly, you can increase the range of the cozy temperature. And this is pretty much how we're going to be dealing with or playing around with in this scenario. So for example, in my case, I'm currently cozy as long as I'm within minus 15 degrees and 40 degrees Celsius. Now, this is not really my body temperature, but the ambient temperature around me. So currently we have 10 degrees here. And this can also be, for example, quickly altered by carrying a torch. Also crafting certain things. You have, if you go to your Memento cradle, you can craft things such as campfires, stoves, later on also coolers or heaters. Now, as of right now, it's not too difficult to deal with the temperature, but the devs mentioned that in phase 3 or 4, things are going to be rather difficult to deal with, so I'm curious to see how this plays out. But, a brief mention is, there are ways to improve that range of coziness, if you will. And for me, there's really two things that play into that role. The first one is there's a permanent way, and the second one is a temporary way, rather buffs. And the very first one is when you craft armor on your on your chest and on your pants piece, you can craft armor with specific hides that increase cold resistance and frost resistance, also grant various other buffs, and there's obviously also heat and burn resistance. Same thing goes for the pants. So depending on what you're looking for or what area you're traversing in, you either may craft two specific armor sets, or there's one set, but I have not seen these rabbits, or rather I don't know what rabbits I need to hunt. There's this dreamy rabbit fur that increases both cold and heat resistance, so maybe that's a way to not deal with having two multiple sets, but we'll see how difficult it is going to be to deal with the heat later on. Now, these resistances are actually visible in your gear tab by pressing the details tab. You can see that I currently have 25 frost and cold and 10 heat and burn resistance. This is why my temperature cozy range is fairly wide, and this is also be depicted by this little gray area. So this one is my cozy zone, this one here is cold, this one here is hot. I think that goes without saying, blue, cold, hot, warm, right? But your goal is pretty much to, first of all, stay in that cozy area and then make sure that your cozy area is able to deal with the ambient temperatures that you're currently in. And also, I mentioned that there's temporary ways to improve this, and there are two main ways as of right now. The first one is so-called thermomium that can be turned into heatium and coldium. Yes, these names are there. They're very descriptive, but they're pretty much telling you what they're doing, and carrying these will increase your resistance to said element. Heatium already gives it away. It gives you resistance against cold and frost, and coldium is vice versa, the other way around. So heatium, or carrying a heatium, gives you plus 10 to those resistances for 60 minutes. And these are stupid cheap to make, right? There you go away, thank you. These only cost a thermomium, which is crafted by gravel, and then you need charcoal or hot rock ore. I haven't seen hot rock ore yet, but charcoal is easy to come by. It's really not difficult. So crafting these is really not difficult. The only problem is that you can't really chug them on the go, such as a buff, right? So currently I have this, and keep in mind we have minus 15 to 40 degrees. So if I throw this one out, now it probably takes a while to refresh. There we go. My cozy went down from minus 15 to minus 5, or up, depending on which way you're looking at. And the gray bar actually became a bit smaller. So if I pick this one up again, you can see that below the minimap, there was a little bit of an increase. And the other way to increase this is by consuming foods that have either cold or hot resistance buffs. You can craft these later down the line in the memetics. If we go to food crafting, at the very bottom here, you can see that there is dishes there is an all-weather stew and seafood and meat platter. So I assume the all-weather stew is probably going to give us both hot and cold resistance. I'm not sure if it's going to be using some deviated plants. Obviously, if we knew that by now, we could start planting them. But depending on how difficult it is to stay above the temperatures in the future, these might be important or not. As I said, I briefly mentioned on this, having a torch in your inventory is always a plus, because it can very quickly just increase your ambient temperature by 5 degrees by simply putting it out and putting it back. So there's that. And yeah, like I said, I think it's just important. This is what you're working with. This is where you see your resistances. And yeah, just make sure that whatever traversal you is, stay within that range, because trust me, this temperature debuff, the frost one, I haven't seen the blaze one yet because there's no hot area right now, but I already died twice trying to just pass an area for like 40 seconds. So this one is very, very deadly, and if you cannot go to an area that needs to be visited for a quest or something, go back, craft a hetium, and if really needed, craft some of these food buffs and chug them in, carry a torch, and you should have no trouble doing with that. As I mentioned, stuff of this may actually change in the future, depending on how difficult it is going to be. But as of right now, this is fairly simple. And most of these plants, for example, you can see these here. These are these little spike tomatoes. And with salt and these spike tomatoes, you can craft these dishes that give you cold resistance in this regard, which makes sense because we're here, right? And this one is another way, so I'm just going to chuck these. Remember, we have minus 15 to 40. We're going to eat this. Et voila, we're now at minus 45. Did it not refresh? I'm confused. Did it only increase my cold resistance? I'm a bit confused. It might not refresh correctly. There we go. So this is a bit iffy, right? So now I'm currently resistance up to minus 25 degrees or up to 40 degrees, which is a fairly wide radius. You can see there's almost only gray. So currently it seems this is more than enough to not worry about it too much. And if I really needed to, I can just increase my ambient temperature by 5 degrees. So I'm technically safe all the way up until minus 30 degrees if I carry my torch. And yeah, this is it about the heat mechanic. I think this is important to understand. TLDR is make sure that your cozy zone is as big as it needs to be, or rather that the temperature that you're targeting makes sense for the area that you're visiting. Craft armor with the respective materials to give you either cold or hot resistance, and if needed, craft a hetium, craft a coldium. Remember, these only last 60 seconds, and then craft a corresponding food buff if you need any additional temperatures. And that's it for the temperature mechanic. Hopefully this provides some guidance to you, and I'll see you guys next time.